Hey guys, Darren Kelly, coach of Wildest Reports, and welcome back to another episode of my team review post round 6. It was another pretty poor fantasy week for majority of the competition again, with a lot of sub concerns happening over the weekend, which I'll get into pretty shortly. But also just generally in a footy sense, there was a lot of upsets in the tipping world. I think in my own tipping, I only got 3 out of 9 this week, so pretty poor in that sense. But it showed that there was a huge amount of upsets and a lot of different swings, with players not going well, some going well better than what we expected them to. So, but let's get into how my team performed this week. It was another pretty poor score again for me. Um, Round rank of 30k again. That's, I think, 3 back to back to back, even after the 50k last week. So, yeah, pretty poor, and yeah, not even scoring the 19,000 when a lot of people were scoring, mid 2050s, which probably about par, I would say. If not, maybe closer to 2000 would have been about right. But I did luckily avoid the trainer 2, which obviously was the main issue a lot of teams had this week, with him being announced as sub only an hour before the game as expected. But it obviously was a huge surprise to a lot of coaches, not expecting him to be sub. First time he's been sub all year, and I guess I got lucky in the sense that I did get cold feet in the end. Coming into that sort of into the weekend, I was like, I'm not really too sure, especially with Bolter back. How's that going to affect trainers' scoring capacity? And I moved him off field, put Bergman in the back there, and obviously fielded the likes of Lindsay instead in the midfield. But at the end of the day, the fantasy gods went, you can't have that. Miles Bergman, he's a 30 on your head, and that probably hurt a lot more than what a trainer did, because at least trainer still made a bit of cash, made 1k, and he's a rookie at the end of the day. I'm not expecting a 33 from a 800k player dropping 41k, and is potentially an issue that I need to address pretty shortly, if not this week, depending on what I need to do. Another issue, Zach Reed in the defensive line. We went on about last week about the 3 defender rookies that we were comfortable fielding, and after what has been a pretty good performance from them two for a long time, for the majority of the start of the season, they just shit the bed. 36 from Reed and a 2 from Trainer definitely was not expected. So he is another issue that we need to address. Just didn't get amongst the marking in that back half. Only the 5 marks, which is obviously a positive. He's always going to have that, but it really just didn't chip it around against West Coast, even though they were struggling a fair bit. And maybe if they weren't struggling as much, they could have chipped it around a fair bit more. But yeah, obviously they only won by 2 points just in the end there. So didn't get amongst it, and he even had to go into the ruck contest in the second half after Sam Draper went down with what was an Achilles. So he's out for the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Breed for the remainder of the season. I do expect him to stay as a halfback, as the best 22. As a keyback, and obviously Goldstein comes in. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. But his break even's up to 31 now, so he's another one that could potentially start to go. Collingwood this weekend is a tougher matchup, so probably won't lose any cash, but yeah, probably won't make too much more from here either. So he is one that if his cash on his head gets you to someone, then he could definitely go. Same with Trainer. With Trainer though, I will say up against Melbourne, very good matchup. The only question mark I have with him is he going to be the sub again? It's hard to sort of say, but luckily they do play on the Thursday night, the first game of the round, so we will know pretty early on what is happening with him. The other news that I won't touch too much on, because I don't want to get too much in the legal side of things, is Noah Bolter has avoided jail time, but he does have a curfew of has to be home by 10 o'clock p.m. So that really puts a bit of a struggle on him attending games and playing those night games, particularly this weekend. Starting at 7 o'clock, the game's probably going to finish, 10 minutes to 10, roughly, on average. So he's not going to get home in 10 minutes. So that it'll be interesting to see whether they select him and then, he gets subbed out, maybe 3/4 time or something like that. So he has half an hour, 45 minutes to get home from there. We shouldn't have to be dealing with this in the first place. We just shouldn't have players that are on, have these protocols in the AFL. I think the AFL should step in, but it's not in our hands, and we just have to deal with it in a fantasy sense. But fingers crossed, Trainer is named, and hopefully it was just a rest, and he's back in the side and continue scoring his proper ways. I think that break even of 58 is very achievable this weekend, and is definitely someone that you could be looking to field over the like of Zach Reed. If you had to choose between one of them, I'd definitely be going Trainer with a nicer matchup, and probably the highest ceiling as such, with before the two was back to back 70 pluses. So yeah, I really like what he can do if he can not be the sub. So that will definitely be a determining factor when it comes to my trades. My midfield did score okay. Bringing in Dacos in the trade was very nice, and putting the BC on him with a 131 was a great start to the weekend, and I thought I was on for a pretty decent one because not many people went with the BC on him, but that didn't turn out to continue throughout the rest of the weekend. I should also mention before I get into some more of these. I was away for the weekend. Easter. I was away with family down at Victor Harbour. If you don't know, that's an hour and a half south of Adelaide, and in and out of reception for most of the weekend. So I wasn't too focused on the football. I probably only watched maybe 2 or 3 games all weekend. So I don't have so much information to probably relay to you guys, but I will be doing my research before trade mode and whatnot. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, then there's a few reasons why I probably scored as well as I did, because I really wasn't paying as too much attention as I normally would. But midfield overall, I was surprised Jordan Dawson scored as well as he did in a tougher matchup. It was good to see him do that. Didn't cop any attention, which was a surprising one. Obviously Rankin got the attention, but still managed to score the 98, which is a real big positive for him. To see that he's getting attention from one of the toughest taggers in a Bedford and still able to put up a very comfortable score is awesome to see, and sort of solidifies that I expect him to be a top 6 forward for the rest of the year with what he's been able to score so far in even tougher matchups, and just imagine with some ceiling scores against easier matchups to come very shortly. So if you don't have him, he's definitely one to target. Looks like he's put that calf concerns behind him. Rosie off halfback again, awesome. Probably wasn't as good as he was last week against Hawks, but the time on ground was an awesome thing to see. 95% off halfback, obviously not having to do as much intensive work, so yeah, he's just able to get a bit more time on ground, which is awesome to see. So only had the 22% CBAs this week, and I think that was mainly due to the fact that Wines went down with a heart issue. I think it was in the second half he had to come into the midfield just slightly. So I do expect this halfback role to stick, and he's scoring quite well there, so that is a nice positive to see. Obviously talked about Nick Dacos. He is probably still a massive target for anyone that didn't grab him last week. Yes, he's gone up, 44k, so you're paying a little bit more now, and he's probably priced around that 106 to 107 range. So you are paying a little bit more, but I still expect he still is a little bit of value. Probably does cop a bit of attention. As we all know, he's going to cop attention every second week, pretty much. I think Essendon have already said they're going to put some attention into him, if not have 2 players put a bit of attention into him. That could be a Setterfield or a Durham, as we've seen previously. So stay tuned for that. I don't think it's going to harm him too much. He's copped a bit of attention in the last 2. I should say he didn't cop too much attention in the Brisbane game. I think it was mainly in the third quarter, and he still managed to kick a goal and put up, I think it was 25 points or whatever in that quarter. So he's just getting it done no matter how he goes about it. So he's definitely one you want in your team. Oliver was a little bit poor with an 81, a little bit lower time on ground this week. Just very handball happy, as we sort of see. 5 kicks, 20 handballs. If he just makes it 50-50, it would have been well into the 90s. So not too much to be concerned about there. 1 mark, 6 tackles. Just, it is Oliver things. He'll be fine. And a good run to come up next 2 matches. So you're not looking to jump off him just yet. My boy Soligo, again, another very poor score, averaging about 75 in my side at the moment. Is a concern, but again, where I should mention that we are in a race right now. It is trying to get as many rookies off field as fast as possible, so that is my mindset at the moment. I'm not trying to move off these guys that are not having major role changes at the moment. So Sligo, his role's fine. He had 80% tog in the midfield on the weekend, so he's good to go. I just need to see some reward from him in terms of his scoring. 78-9 on the weekend was pretty poor, but he only had 2 points in the third quarter. So if he just had a standard third quarter, then he probably would have scored close to that time. So disappointing to see, but in a harder matchup against GWS, I was sort of expecting a lower score anyway, so I'm not super disappointed about that, but it does hurt, especially when the likes of a lot of people have a Chero who's just absolutely destroying me at the moment with a consistent hundreds at a cheaper price tag is difficult to see. Ryan Merrick with a 72, just consistent with his 70s at the moment. Lost a lot of his kick-ins on the weekend, so that probably lowers his floor a little bit, but it was good to see him get plenty of marks around the ground, and he just generally looked like a pretty good player, off that halfback. So I'm not too concerned with him. Up against Hawks this week is a tough matchup, so we'll see how he goes. Lower break even of 47, sorry, so it should still make a bit of money from here, but I wouldn't be looking to jump on him with the lower security now. Goes into Melbourne and Richmond in the next two after that, even St Kilda. So the next three were probably pretty consistent, so I'll probably at least hold him for another month, I would think. So consider that one there. I wouldn't be jumping off him this week, just even with the concerns. Two rookies, 63s. Levi Ashcroft was a little bit lower than expected, but in a side that got heavily beaten against Collingwood and what was a very low fantasy scoring side. Yeah, 63 is probably about standard. He should be fine to go. And Lindsay, 63 from him was a positive to see that he's, getting back to his older ways, scoring pretty good. And obviously, the next couple matchups are a huge positive as well. So I'll be comfortable field him there. So he'll be on my field. Into the rucks, Tom de Koning against Christian Cherry is always going to be a bit of a nightmare score, and probably where a lot of the drama happened early on this week. With obviously they played the second game of the round early Friday night, and a lot of people were relying on Harry Boyd being the looping option for a Dacos or whoever you had as a BC, and obviously he was named within the squad on Thursday night, and no way to confirm that he was not going to play. I eventually just went, I don't think he's playing. He's always going to be the emergency, and just locked in TDK on the bench with the E. Put Harry Boyd as my C, just backing that he's not going to play. And if he did play, I did go on Twitter and said that if he did play, I would have just ran with someone else as my C, and I probably would have been happy with a Harry Boyd because he probably would have scored it very similar to a Tom de Koning anyway there. So I wasn't too worried about that in a sense. But yeah, so happy to see Tristan Cherry with the 116. Good to see him back in form with 14 touches and 11 marks. Got him to that big 116. Looked like he was generally just moving around the field a lot better and wasn't struggling as much as what we have seen previously. So again, goes to show you do not trade your premiums, especially when they're struggling as much as he was. They were always going to turn around. If there was something major wrong, they would have not played him. He was obviously one that you just look to hold on to, and the time on ground was bumped up as well, which is nice. Would like to see a few more disposals in his caliber, but you can't be arguing with a 116. I will say in that game as well, I think he had 90 ruck contests, which is fairly high, I believe. So I'm not expecting it to continue to be, this 116 player for a little while. He's still got a very tough run coming up, so I'm not expecting. I don't think he's a huge trade-in target right now. He still has a pretty high break even to 115. Probably drops another 80 to 90 this week. So anyone looking to jump on him, I'd still hold off a little while longer. Again, we are still in the race to get the rookies off field as quick as possible. So I'm not messing around with ruck roulettes and wheelhouses and whatnot to move him on. So happy to do that, even if that means Tom de Koning struggling as much as he is with three very poor scores in a row up against Stanley this week. Another bit of a tougher matchup and a tougher run to come overall. He's one that potentially could go because, again, I didn't see him being a top liner for the year. I just thought, we obviously knew he had a very good run to start the season. Solo ruck for majority of the first 5-6 weeks, and Pitnet due to come in pretty shortly. So we'll see what happens with that one. There's every chance that he may need to be moved on if Pitnet does come back in the side, as I've mentioned for the last 2-3 weeks. So stay tuned for that one. Jack McRae, another poor score with an 83. What should have been a pretty good matchup. 9 tackles, which is a huge positive, but yeah, only the 19 disposals, which is shocking to see. I don't know why he didn't score much better than what he would have expected. And I know a lot of people had him as a bit of a captain option, so it's pretty disappointing to see. Bailey Smith, very similar with an 84. Against tougher matchup with Hawthorn. Got banged up a little bit, just Hawthorn are a pretty tough matchup, so it was pretty restrictive all day. They just did not allow them to score much points, and yeah, I won't say too much more about that game. I'm still a bit salty that we should have won that game. But yeah, he's fine there. He's now the most expensive forward of my forward line currently. That's not obviously including Nick Martin. Isaac Rankin already spoke about him already. He's gone really positive and a huge target. Jason on Francis, 3 tons on the trot and looks like he's just thirsty for the ball. Massive kick to handball ratio this week, which is positive, and obviously getting the tons done without kicking goals, which is awesome to see. I can only imagine when he starts kicking more goals that he will have some ceiling scores and start hurting those non-owners. And that could come fairly shortly, against North this week, Western Bulldogs the week after. Yeah, so pretty good run still to come for Horn Francis. So here's another target if you can grab him. Cab Daniel with an 80. He's starting to become a little bit of a worry. He was pretty shocking on the weekend. This is one of the games I did watch, and he just did not look composed to the ball at all. Got caught holding the ball a couple of times, and his kicking was generally just pretty bad. Turned it over a fair few times. So there are some concerns that he may not be in the long-term plans to stay on that side. And there's a chance that, the likes of Sheasel or McCurcher goes down back to help out down there to be a bit more of a lethal kick down there, particularly with the likes of Zach Fisher going down with a hamstring injury. It does open up another position back there, so keep an eye on him, but I'm not too concerned just yet. Everyone has him, but it could be obviously a award-winning pick if you were to jump off early and he starts to put up some lower scores. But at the end of the day, an 80 is definitely not your worst score on field, and I would recommend getting the rookies off field first. And finally, my biggest fuck up for the weekend was trusting Geelong to not have a late in. I thought they named their team on the Sunday night pretty late. They played Monday afternoon, less than 24 hours ahead of time. I was like, surely they can't go 6 weeks in a row with a late in. Ted Closey was named as omitted. He wasn't in the side. Okay, I saw Murphy Reid had a 74 as my emergency on the bench. I thought, Davidson up against St Kilda, it's touch and go whether he's going to have a decent score or he's going to have a bit of stinky score. Or, I just trust with the Murphy Reid with a guaranteed 74. I went with that option. Didn't go with Davidson, put him on the bench and put Ted Closey in there. I will caveat that I was heavily drunk at this stage, out on a farm, not really within reception, and I wasn't really paying too much attention to footy. Locked out, obviously, Sunday night. I checked my phone Monday morning and realised that I had done that. And yeah, I had a really bad feeling when Ted Closey came in as a lady and started as a sub. Luckily, he did come on early in the third quarter, and luckily put up 28 points to minimise the damage. But in the end of the day, I did lose about 60 points or 50 points, however you want to look at it, in that one move. So that is my bad and bad coaching at the end of the day. I should have just trusted Davidson on field and not trusted Geelong in any such sense of form. So that's how the team really performed. A lot of pretty poor scores on my bench as well. 2 from Trainer, 22 from O'Sullivan, 30 from Moraes, 28 from Ted Closey, and 33 from Cleary, who was the option to trade in last week, especially over the likes of Gross and Sad O'Hawley, who ended up starting as the sub. But Cleary just didn't get it done. Didn't have any tackles this week, which we saw he relied on quite heavily in the previous weeks. So fingers crossed it was just a 1 week blip, especially against Port Adelaide. Tough matchup. They lost pretty badly in that game. Up against Suns, I'm expecting him to go a bit better. So fingers crossed he does stay in the side. That is another worry that he does get dropped after that performance because they were badly beaten. But fingers crossed he's all good. Let's move into my trade review. So overall, my trades were pretty positive. Jumping off Sam de Koning, who scored just the 41, dropped the 33k. He's definitely one that I had to go. So glad to jump off him, and I jumped off Joe Berry in the end after he was dropped. There's probably a question mark whether I should have just held him and used him as the looping option instead of the likes of Ted Closey. I probably should have done that in the end. I just thought, Ted Closey has the flexibility with mid forward. It's going to be a bit more useful, but being a Geelong player, it's really not going to be that much more beneficial to me. Even though Geelong do play a lot of games late on Sunday, so yeah, bit of a bad move there. But overall, one of them had to go, and Joe Berry was losing money fairly quickly with a break even of 53. So jumped off those two and did grab Nick Dacos and Cleary, which made me about 90k. So overall, pretty decent trades. But overall, my team did not score well at all. I don't think I really touched on the three main defenders up there. They did what they needed to do, Wanganui Malera. What was it? A tough matchup, I believe. Yeah, sorry, not a tough matchup. But Western Bulldogs just pretty poor. I think Sinclair did even worse, so I can't complain too much. He now drops below $1 million. Jaden Short with the worst score of the year so far, 68. I believe he had a 0-point quarter in the last fourth quarter, so that's really disappointing to see. Would have at least put up in an 80 or something. So yeah, I think he's not one I'm too worried about, but we'll see. And good to see Matt Roberts back in a little bit of form on the weekend. So that's how the team performed. +3, -3. I'll just give my +3 to Dacos. 133. You can't argue with that too much. He was clearly my best scorer, and obviously you love to see someone you trade in go as well as he did. Plus the VC, it's hard to go past. -3. Can I just give it to myself coaching, honestly? If I can't, I'll just go with Miles Bergman. That was pretty disappointing to see from an 800k player. And the concern is with him is Rosie back in the halfback. Is that taking points off of him? I didn't think so, particularly after the last week where he played just 43% time on the tog and he had 52 points. I thought he's all good to go. The role hasn't changed much for him. He's still taking a couple kicks ins and getting the ball generally off the halfback, but just in this game, he just did not do anything at all. Just did not look like he was getting amongst it. So there is a bit of concern, but I'm thinking so far I'll just run with it another week. If it continues and he drops another score, then he'll be a must trade out target. I just really want to back in these mid prices that I have and continue to upgrade my side as best as possible and get those massive points on ground. So that's what I'm thinking with that. Captain VC and C for the week obviously was Dacos, and I was going to go into McRae was my C option, so gladly Dacos got the trockies in that one and got it done, and I was able to loop it on, so that's positive. I guess the other things I need to discuss is my problem areas. So I've obviously discussed Miles Bergman is the main issue. The D6 option is the other main issue I've got to address. That's probably where I'm going to get the most points upgrade this week, particularly because there's every chance that a Reed goes another 40 this week, and a trainer, if he's a sub again, then obviously goes sub 40 as well. So that could get some massive points upgrades if I can get an upgrade in that position, particularly, which is a complete backflip from what we were talking about last week, where we were trying to get these rookies on field. So there's that. Sligo, as I mentioned, is a bit of an issue, but I'm not going to address it just yet. Merrick, like I said, I think he'll be fine for the next 4 weeks. Besides that, it's really Tom de Koning is a bit of an issue, but it's really who you're going to. If anyone traded, a cherry to a Briggs last week based off of my advice, I do apologize. I would never expected Briggs to drop as bad of a score as he did. I don't even know why he did that. that's just how fantasy goes sometimes. Even with the best matchups and what looks to be the right time to jump on someone, they just do drop a pretty bad score. But yeah, I wouldn't be changing too much in the ruck. If you are changing, then obviously the one that you're going to is the likes of Max Gorn. So he's the only one that I'd be comfortable jumping on at this point in time. So, but then you're not getting an upgrade on the other side of things is the concern. So keep that in mind. Besides that, it's really just my rookies that are starting to become a lot of the concern now. Trainer obviously has a higher break even of 58, and if he's a sub, he's an obvious one that has to go. Reed 31 break even is probably okay for another week. Stone 26 probably okay for another week as well, but O'Sullivan 46, he's not hitting that. He's gonna drop some coins. He's one that may need to go. Same with Moraes 52. Pretty shocking after only trading him in 2-3 weeks ago after his 93. Made a bit of coin, but yeah, it's starting to really plummet now. Matthew Reed probably can survive another week, but he does have a lot of coin on his head, so he probably could make way to get the player I want of interest. And obviously these other guys, Sam Davison obviously has a lot of money on his head as well, but he's obviously putting up some very decent scores, so he's not one urgently that needs to go just yet. But that leads me into what my trades are going to be this week, and I do have a couple different options at this stage, as I do every single week. I like to tick off all my different options at the moment, but my first option that I would like to do, and what I think gets me the most points on field, does mean trading out Davidson and does mean trading out Zach Reed. So two players that I did have on field, which isn't ideal. But this is in the scenario that Trainer is good to go this week. I'm trusting him. He's going to be a good option on field, and he's not going to be a sub. So I do field him over the likes of whoever else is going to be in the defensive line. And I am going to the likes of, I think it's Matthew Carroll. I just like him as the job security type. I know a lot of people are looking at Tunstall from Brisbane Lions playing as a halfbacker at the moment, but I just think Carroll, middle of the table price, I think he has a better job security rather than a Tunstall who only played 58% time on ground on the weekend. I will talk about this more in depth in the trade mode video, but I just think Carroll on the halfback probably has a better job security and is not a bad price tag. Obviously, he's had the two easy matchups where he's scored quite well. It will be interesting to see how he goes in a bit of a tougher matchup this week, but -4 break even in a pretty small batch of group of rookies. I think is definitely up there as number 2, if not number 1. That does leave me with 926k to jump on any player I really want, but I think in the forward line it is just going to be the likes of Petrarca. Leaves me 36k for the next week, which isn't ideal, but it does get me a top 6 forward for the remainder of the year, and does probably bank me 30 or 35 points on field, going from a Davidson who's probably a safe 60 to a Petrarca who should be a 90 to 100, if not 105 for the next couple of weeks particularly. Move back into the midfield on the weekend as well. So that is potential number 1. Another one that I was looking at is a little bit of a less, it's probably jumping off rookies that probably have a bit more urgency that need to go, and that is Finn O'Sullivan and Reyes, and that would mean jumping on the likes of Ned Long, who looked great on the weekend, scored the 81 after the 104 the week prior. Bryant goes into a bit of a nicer matchups in the next couple of weeks. Doubtful that he's going to be the sub, making a huge amount of money. It is just jumping on another mid-pricer though. So it doesn't give me a huge amount of confidence, but I do really like him as an option as that mid-price if you can't get from anyone. It is jumping off two rookies, so it is an upgrade in the sense to someone that is going to make a bit of money, and that is also jumping on the likes of Matt Carroll as well. I could jump on any rookie if I really wanted to, but I think Matt Carroll is the one that suits my team the best. Obviously, I would need to make a few shuffles here and there just to make that fit my structure, but yeah, that's my second option. The third one, It's very unlikely to happen, in my opinion, but this is the scenario that I like to cover off just in case, trainer is the sub and then I don't feel comfortable training Reed, then I need to bring in a defender, right? So then that would mean trainer needs to go. And then I would use the money on Davidson's head to get me up to the best player I can possible in the defensive line. So that doesn't leave me a huge amount of cash because it leaves me 1.2. And if you're looking at the rookie that I'm bringing in, which in this scenario was Dunstall, however you want to say it, leaves me only 986k for a defender that I can afford. Not looking at Ash as much as people want me to look at Ash. He's been amazing. I just don't feel comfortable with it. I just don't believe that Whitfield and Ash can both be this good back there, averaging well over 100. So I just don't like it as an option. I think there's every chance that he goes back to being a 70 to 80 player very quickly. So I'm not confident with it, but I'm not going to stop anyone that wants to trade him in. But not for me just yet. So my options really is Matt Holmes I could grab with 955k. That does leave me about 30k left over for the week. But he does have a pretty tough run coming up. GWS, Port Adelaide, pretty tough. Even Collingwood have been tough as well. I'm also looking at for tags. Definitely going to get some attention from Bedford potentially. And that's probably about it that I can see. So a bit concerned there, but he's very up and down. He goes 130, 60, 119, 70. He's very going to be up and down. So again, could be a decent option to trade him in this week. He should go a decent 120 if he continues his trend. So I don't mind him there. The other one that I potentially looked at is Carl Amon with his amazing run, particularly over the next 4 weeks, is pretty impressive. So he has been pretty impressive all year, realistically. Besides that 60, he's averaging nearly 105. So that's probably where I see him being for the next 4 weeks, particularly with this nicer run. So I expect him to be quite a top 6 defender for those particular weeks. And if he didn't cop too much attention in the Brisbane game, sorry, not Brisbane, the GWS game, then he would be well up there in terms of being a very consistent player, taking a lot of kick-ins for Hawthorn back there, and just generally being a very good player off halfback, getting plenty of marks there. So I really like what he can do. And looking at his run, what he's had so far, he's had pretty tough matchups. Sydney weren't the easiest. Carlton, up and down. Obviously, GWS are a very tough matchup. Port Adelaide, very tough matchup. Imagine what he can do in an easy matchup. We saw it a bit on the weekend with a 110 from the Cats. A pretty nice matchup. So he's definitely one that I'm eyeing off potentially this week as well. So that would probably be my preference at this stage. But I could also just go with Holmes and lock that away for the remainder of the year. So there's my options. That's what I'm looking at doing. So there's a few different scenarios that I need to wait on and see in teams. But yeah, fingers crossed that does move my team forward. But overall, it is a pretty poor team. At the end of the day, it's not performing as well as it should. Did drop another 2,500 ranks over the weekend with a poor score. So need to bounce back and need to start performing. But I don't think... it's not going my way at the moment, so that's for sure. But a lot of that's due to me, and a lot of that's due to just a bit unlucky here and there. So hopefully you guys had a much better weekend than I did. Please leave a like, subscribe, do all those good things, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow for trade mode. I'll catch you then, guys. Peace.